In this video, I'm going to show you a JavaScript framework which supports database out of the box. We are going to explore MyKode and we'll see how we can create a minimal application using MyKode. Let's move on to a computer screen and let's get started. Before we get started with MyKode Framework and before we write any code, let me explain you what exactly is MyKode Framework and why you would want to use MyKode Framework. Now, MyKode is a framework designed to expedite the development of web single page applications. It implements both front-end as well as backend. The backend is written for Node.js since it is a layer built on top of Node.js. It allows a developer to be free of many concerns which arise when implementing a new Node.js application from the ground up. The front end is written in JavaScript, means it implements a rich client for the backend, enabling the user to interact with the application without the need for frequent postbacks. The backend also provides REST APIs that perform the most common operations for a data-driven application. For example, MyKode allows you to search data with a query by example QBE approach, edit existing data, enter new data, open children detail interfaces, even on a second or third level from the main one, cascade, delete a record and all of its details, view lists based on a user's selections, and many more. The framework implements the concept of datasets familiar to .NET developers. Now, traditional dataset stores a representation of the data and its relations in memory. It uses tables to hold data and it is usually comprised of a main table holding an interface main entity and child tables holding its sub-entities. The relationship between an entity and a sub-entity is based on the familiar concept of foreign key, foundation for relational databases theory. During user interaction, entities and sub-entities which are being manipulated, main tables and details tables are cached from the database. The framework facilitates automatic reading and writing of data used by a web page, managing automatic row insertion and calculation of key fields for both cache data and data which is finally being written to the database. Web pages design is simplified with the help of HTML tags which link interface elements and data properties and fields. On interface instantiation, the framework automatically populates the data which needs to be shown based on configured tags. The data editing loop for the user revolves around invoking framework methods to read and write data from a web page. A MyKode application includes metadata classes to describe entities and metapage classes to manage pages behavior. The metaapp class manages interface instances and the passing of data between them. To summarize, MyKode frontend simplifies the development of complex web interfaces, offering a convention-based approach and facilitating data management through a centralized class, the dataset. It also allows easy extensibility in both the visual interface and function departments. The backend includes classes for accessing many relational databases interchangeably. The model for a database is implemented via JSSet class used for managing in-memory data. The framework uses JSON Web Tokens, JWT, for authentication. We all are familiar with JWT. The JS application class serves as a prototype for the application, allowing customization of existing methods to suit specific needs. It handles authentication, it creates context for requests, and it establishes user sessions. Routes are configured to require appropriate tokens, allowing for fine-grained authorization. Data access is facilitated through class like data access, get data, and post data, each serving different purposes. The JS business logic class manages business rules, applying SQL checks to individual rows read into the database. The JS security class handles application security and integrity during the data saving phase, utilizing configurable conditions which can be modified even when the application is running. Datasets are stored in JSON format according to the structure of the JS dataset class. MyKode supports manual, semi-manual, and visual creation of datasets. The metadata class centralizes information about each table. It manages data validity checks, definition of default values, definition of auto increment key, and list structures. While not specifically required on the backend, usage of the class becomes very useful for the developer if front-end services are employed on the client. Sharing metadata schema allows for easier implementation. Detailed information about tables and their structures is stored in the metadata file. So guys, I'm inside of my computer screen and the very first thing that I'm going to do here is download MS SQL Server. So why am I downloading and installing MS SQL Server? I'll reveal it very soon. I'm going to fill this form. Let me fill this form and then you can click here to simply download SQL Server 2022. And once it is downloaded, I'll install it. So you are given three options: basic, custom, and download media. I'll select basic, next, and then I'm going to choose the default path and then next. And then there is an option to install SSMS, which is SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to install SSMS as well, and let me save it somewhere on my PC. It has been downloaded. So once it is downloaded, I'm going to run the installer and install this. Now I'm going to tell you in a while why am I doing all these things, but hang on, let's install Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. It is installed. Let me click connect. So I'll click connect, and so I'll go to properties, and after going to properties, I'll select SQL Server and Windows authentication mode. I'll click OK and then OK once again. We have done this so that we can authenticate using a MyKode application. Basically, the data that we are planning to store will be stored in our MS SQL database. So actually, it's an MS SQL instance. Let's choose a database name and password. I'll choose the database name as Harry, and then I'll click on logins. And let me click on SQL Server Authentication, and I'll set a password. Login name is SQL. Let me change it to root. And yeah, SQL Server is now configured to be connected using username and password. So let's move on to the next step, and let's map the user Harry and give all the permissions to this user Harry so that I can use this user and connect to MS SQL Server through MyKode. Now let's come back to our VS Code. The very first thing that I'm going to install is npm install ---- global u, and the next thing that I'm going to install is bower. And let me copy this command, and you'll also have to run npm install ---- global grunt. So let's execute these commands one by one. I'm waiting for it to finish. Now I'm following the documentation, and this documentation has all the code that you need to execute. Let's install bower now, and basically I'm going to create everything that is written in the documentation as of now. And now I'll install grunt, and I'm setting up the application and following the documentation to create this minimal app. Let's initialize this repository as an npm repository, and this is now an npm project. Now once you have globally installed everything, you will have to initialize this repo as an npm project, and then you can do npm install and start installing all the libraries. So let's do npm install generator MyKode for this project. So a node modules folder will be created and generator MyKode will be installed. This generator MyKode has all the capabilities to generate a basic application of MyKode. So you can simply run yo MyKode now, and then you can your program will be created. It is asking me some questions. Let me answer its questions. So I have chosen a project name, and it is asking me for a password. Okay, I'm going to override. I'll simply press enter, and some boilerplate code will be generated. So let's wait, and once all this is generated, I'll start creating top level routes by running this command yo MyKode application. So let's copy this command and let's paste it here. Let me adjust it a bit, and let me wait for this to finish. And yes, it has finished installing. Let's paste this command yo MyKode application. Let's press enter, and once you do that, it will ask you for database code. And I'll write mean, and I'll press enter, server name or IP address enter. Database name is Harry, username Harry, password Harry. This is the username and password that I've selected in my MS SQL. Now I'll select JS SQL Server driver, and now let's come back to SQL Server. So as you can see that I have a query inside this demo folder, and this is the SQL Server query. I'll simply copy this and I'll paste it here, and I'll execute this query in my SQL Server. This way the commands will be completed successfully, and I'll be able to execute this. Now once this is done, I'll come back to my VS Code. Let me come back to VS Code, and let me copy the rest of the commands. So the next step is to create a new metadata. So let's create a new metadata by executing this command yo MyKode metadata, and it is asking me for a physical table. I'll simply say mandate, just like they have given in the documentation, and I'll say id mankind, yman, nman, and mandate. Let's paste everything, and I'll now go to client folder, and you will see that a folder called mandate has been created here, and there is a meta mandate.js where I can change the code as I want, and my application is basically adapt to the changes. So I'll show you which function we are going to override. Let's search for a get new row, and I'll copy this get new row function, and I'll paste this get new row function. Basically I'm replacing this get new row function, and once this is done, I'll simply do the same with set defaults. Let's search for set defaults, and yeah, let's replace this as well. I'll put the comma back, and the same can be done for other functions as well. Basically the documentation is customizing the application, and you can customize the application as you want by simply copy pasting all these describe columns and other functions. Now I'm going to do the same once again. I'll say MyKode metadata, and it is again asking me for the physical table to create. This time I'm going to choose mandate detail, and the name of the main table is nothing. I'll simply press enter, and descriptive name is going to be Harry2 because Harry we already chosen, and then I'll say ID mankind, yman, nman, and row number. I'll press enter, and I'll then wait a bit, and then you'll see the client folder has a folder called metadata and mandate detail. So this is the meta mandate detail.js, which has all these functions which can be replaced. So the very first thing that I'm going to replace is the auto increment function. Let's replace this auto increment function, and then the next thing that I want to do is I'll replace this describe columns method, and then I'll run this MyKode metadata once again, mandate kind, and Harry3 will be the descriptive name this time. And you can do the same thing, and if you check your folder you'll find this meta mandate kind.js. Now I'm simply going to replace this describe column method, and the next step I'll do is MyKode metadata. I'll repeat the process once again, and this time I'm going to name the physical table as mandate view, and the main table or the view is going to be nothing. This time Harry4 because Harry1, 2 and 3 are already chosen. Then key fields are going to be ID mankind, yman, and nman this time, and we are simply going to copy the describe columns and override it just like we have done in the previous metadatas. So let's do it once again. I'll select this, I'll paste it and replace it. The next thing that I want to do is to generate HTML. So I'll say MyKode meta page. Note that this is meta page, not metadata. I'll choose a title for the page. Let's choose products, and then table of view name is going to be mandate, and then I'm going to simply press enter, and then symbolic name is going to be default. No, it's not a detail page, so I'll say no. And an HTML file, an empty HTML file is now generated, as you can see. So if I open this HTML file, you'll see that this empty HTML file has been generated, and I'll simply copy this code and give this HTML here, and you can definitely customize this HTML. And once you'll go to this demo folder, you'll find this ds meta mandate default.js. Let's copy all these files and paste it here. And now if I say MyKode meta page, I'll create a product detail page, and I'll press enter, then I'll give a symbolic name of detail, and then once again an HTML page will be generated, and I'll simply paste this HTML here, and this time I'm going to simply run npm grunt add user to add a new user, and let's put the organization name as 23001, and then I'll enter the database name and password, the ones which I have created, and I'll say grunt publish. Now I'll simply start my server by entering node server.js, and you can see that server is listening on 54471. Now if you go to localhost :54471, you can log in, and this is the dashboard. And yes, this dashboard is working. As you can see, the application is created. You can customize your application the way you want, and you can change the HTML. This is in Italian, but feel free to make the changes, and you can perform your CRUD operations the way you want. I hope that you were able to learn something new with this video. Go ahead and try out this MyKode application. I hope you are going to like it. Thank you so much guys for watching this video, and I will see you next time.